Usually I record that.
Is my level okay?
Oh, I should. Thanks for your help,
Sure.
Chris. Can you say pizza, pineapple, Penelope? Lots of P words, please.
Pizza, pineapple, Penelope, putrid, Pimlico, perambulate.
My God.
Prudent.
Wow. You went to a good school.
Oh, no.
That is impressive. Wait, where did you actually go?
Pork chop. I went to Ithaca College.
That's New York.
It's fine.
You go,
It's pretty.
what's it ranked in New York? 25th?
I'm not sure. It's a private school.
Oh.
They always, every year, Variety does top film schools in the country. And it always comes in like number 16. And they're always like, yay. But I'm like, it's number 16, you know?
There's no medals for that. It's something. At least you're not like Fordham in New York City. Like, you know, you have to compete with Columbia and NYU.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You'll never be first.
But it was very, very expensive for coming in at number 16.
Yeah. And you studied film. Okay. Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Oh, hi. You're listening to Service from Hell, a podcast featuring people that are currently in customer service positions and the lucky few that got out and all of the good, bad, and infinitely irritating things that go along with that work. I'm actor and writer Kate Gaffney, and I'm uniquely qualified to discuss this as I used to work at a very busy and very popular comedy club in Los Angeles, and at least one of you listening right now has probably grabbed me and told me you were ready to order when I was running around like a crazy person. So let's eat. I'd like to welcome our guest, writer and producer Chris Regan. Originally from New York City, Chris has worked on some of the most well-known TV shows and movies you have for sure seen, not the least of which are Ted 2, Family Guy, and The Daily Show. Chris also wrote a book with Captain James T. Kirk. You nerds, look that up. Most insanely impressive, Chris marks our first guest winner of both a Peabody and an Emmy Award, and I should clarify, he has more than one of each of those. If we have any Family Guy fans in the audience, you can thank Chris for dragging most of the things I love, like sugar, theater, NPR, and Jews. I better know Chris from the small world of entertainment and getting to hang out with his dog Cricket, who's here, who I can't deal with. She's so cute. I want that on record that I like her more than I like him. That said, Chris, what got you into writing? Did you know you were responsible for some of my favorite lines in television that offended my nerd theater self, not the least of which was describing Hummer drivers as people who, when the car is gone, will, quote, miss driving a military vehicle 45 miles an hour through a school zone to get Crest White Strips. What a read. Chris, talk to us. Tell us things.
Hi, Kate. Thank you for having me on.
I'm so glad you're here.
I kind of fell into writing a little by accident. I went to film school, although I went there initially to be a journalist. Then I wound up in film. Right before senior year, the end of senior year, I realized I didn't like making films. So I just got to New York and started doing comedy, mostly as a performer, and then being as a stand-up. And the thing with stand-up was I would always audition for festivals and things like that. And I would always get, hey, you know, you're a great writer. And which is...
What a backhanded compliment.
Yeah, which for the uninitiated is get off the stage and give... And the thing is, I was never a guy who would bomb badly. I would always... get some warm smiles. And I used to play a place called Triple Inn on West 54th Street, which was a hardcore Irish-American Yankees bar. And we would do stand-up there on Saturday nights. And I think I had the distinction of the only guy who was never heckled. So I knew how to hold my own. But whenever I perform in a real club, I would just get polite applause and polite laughs. And one time I auditioned for the Aspen Comedy Festival and did okay. Didn't do great. And the next day, God bless them, the Aspen people, it was an HBO comedy festival they used to do in Aspen every year. They had me call into a conference call. And they were like, look, we really like you. We like you personally. We like your material. You need to work on a persona. And I was like, and all my stuff was just topical stuff and kind of silly things about movies. And I was kind of like, well, should I wear a hat? What should I do? And but they were saying, really try to carve out a persona for you. Don't just be a joke writer. Be more confessional. Talk about your family, et cetera, et cetera. And then a year went by, and I was still performing around alternative spaces in New York. I wasn't a road guy. And then they called me again when the audition time came around, and they said, so did you work on that stuff that we talked to you about? And I just said, I haven't. And then they said, "Do you want to audition again still?" And I just said, "No."
I didn't buy a hat. I don't want to do that.
Yeah. So I decided then and there that I really should concentrate on being a writer as opposed to an actor, performer, all that stuff. Like, I booked a couple of TV commercials and things like that, but it was never enough to... I mean, it was enough for me to pay off my school loans while I worked another job, because I worked in advertising. But then I just started a guy named Alex Sulkin, who's now my boss. He was a PA at SNL, and he saw me do stand-up one time, and he gave me the fax number when Colin Quinn was doing Weekend Update. And I didn't know Alec that well, and I had good friends who were faxing jokes to Colin Quinn who wouldn't give me the number. And Alec gave me the number. I started faxing. Colin began to buy jokes for me. I'd never met him. And, Colin would pay $100 a pop. This is 1998 out of his own pocket. Very generous. And then Jon Stewart took over at The Daily Show in 99. And he didn't get on terribly well with the Craig Kilborn writing crew. And he asked Colin if he knew of anybody good. And Colin gave him my name. Again, I'd never met Colin other than we had traded answering machine messages. And I had a couple of other people who knew John put in a good word for me. And I submitted about 30 set-up punchline jokes. And I highlighted the ones that Colin had bought. And I was John's first hire.
Holy shit.
And yeah, but then that was also you're not going to be an actor on SNL. You're not going to be in movies. It's time to be a writer. Poor me. But no, it's that's kind of how I always flirted with the idea. I think I could be a writer too. I could write my own material, all my own movies that I was going to star in. But that wasn't in the cards.
Well, I think, you're being a little hard on yourself. He's Irish, folks. Get over it. But you're being a bit hard on yourself. There is a sadness to surrendering the dream of being in front of the camera, if that's really what you wanted to do. Yeah,
but there also comes a time when you really need to not do that. But because, really, I remember the original crew, when I hopped on the Daily Show, a lot of those writers were also stand-up comics. And you could see it was kind of eating them alive that they weren't the guy on camera. Oh. And occasionally as someone who, I know how to deliver a joke, I would hear John, that amateur, deliver a joke in the manner that I wouldn't have done it. And it would be kind of like, why you ought to... And I think, and it took a couple of years for me to have that discussion with the Aspen people, because I was still doing stand-up while I was on the Daily Show.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, it took me a couple of years to realize... wouldn't it be easier to just write and be good at that and stop hollowing yourself out, about what isn't happening? Sure. And as the years have gone by, I've been able to act in things. I do some voices on Family Guy, and I was...
You were in Ted 2?
I was very briefly in Ted 2. I have a line in Ted 2.
You sure do.
I was on... I played Monty Hall on this Showtime series called I'm Dying Up Here.
Oh, my friend, former guest of the podcast, Earl Skakel, was also in that show. That's a really great show.
Oh, okay. Yeah. It was great. And I was on Parks and Recreation.
What were you? I didn't know that. I love that show.
It was in Under 5.
I'll remember.
I played a pundit named Dylan Peaver in the episode Campaign Shakeup.
Campaign Shakeup. I'm going to think of this.
Also starred Katherine Hahn and Paul Rudd. We had no scenes together.
But you were in the same episode as they were. Yeah. That's amazing. Oh, I love it. Yeah. So you've had doors open for you in that arena.
I act just enough. Sure. And oftentimes I get the sense that the real actor might have hurt himself. because particularly with the Parks and Rec thing, Dan Gore, who created Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and he and I worked together at The Daily Show from 99 to 2001 or so. He'd had a pilot he was working on, and he asked me to help out to do Punch-Up on the Radford lot. And I was there, and it was a big, long night, and I was glad to help and pitch some stuff. That show didn't go, but he still worked on Parks. And one Sunday, I got a call from him. He's like, hey, could you help me out with my new episode tomorrow? I'm directing it. So I was like, oh, okay, Punch-Up, that's fine. And they say, okay, wardrobe will call you in like an hour. And then he hung up like, what?
I would have shit my pants and been like, that means I'm going to be on TV.
And they emailed me the script, and it was Under 5. It's right in the cold open, so I knew it wouldn't be cut. Yeah, but I think Dave Miner, who is Dan's manager, and I think he's one of the EPs of Parks.
He is.
He had said to me that if I weren't able to make it, he was going to do it. So I think they weren't necessarily looking for a Juilliard crowd.
Wow.
But I often play pundits, and in the case of Monty Hall, game show hosts, I think I'm good at people who are acting unnaturally. I don't think I'm going to be in any kind of do the work, find the character sort of stuff. I think I'm usually filmed holding a microphone, being somebody who's being filmed while holding a microphone.
Sure. Can you, for our non-entertainment audience, can you explain why you're just kind of like, it's just an under 5? Because I don't think people know what that means.
Basically under 5 lines. And they could be 5 great lines, but it's a certain designation and a certain pay scale, I believe.
It is.
Whereas when I played Monty Hall, and this was Monty Hall in the 70s, by the way, I don't want the audience to get the idea that I'm in my 90s.
You look great.
Thank you. But that was a guest star. And
shit.
Yeah, that's the biggest part I've ever had.
Wow.
Like that was a 12-hour day. That was about 7 or 8 pages of dialogue.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So that was my one real performance. And I think I might have been the only guy who auditioned.
Holy shit.
It was because I had auditioned for, my friend Julius Sharp had this show, Making History. And he wanted me to audition for the part of John Hancock. It was a very funny show that went a season on Fox a couple of years ago. And it wound up going to the very gifted Neil Casey, as well as it should have. He's very talented. But the casting agency called my managers, who are my writing manager, and said, hey, would he want to play Monty Hall? I'm like, okay. So, and I'm Dying Up Here is a show about comedy in the 70s, and they have some real life people in it and being played by people like me. And I went there, and they were auditioning guys for Wolfman Jack. And for your younger listeners, he was a DJ in the 70s. He's an American Graffiti, but a big fat guy with a big beard and a big gravelly voice. And I walked into the casting room, and it was just all these big fat guys with beards. I'm like, I'm here on Wolfman Jack Day. And I just auditioned for Monty Hall. There was no callback. They just called my managers that afternoon. It's like, can he do it next week? I'm like, okay. And
shit.
Yeah, it was like a nice fitting with vintage clothing, and they built this Let's Make a Deal set, old school from the 1970s, and it was directed by a Scotsman named John Baird, who directed that Stan Ollie movie a couple of years ago with Steve Coogan. So
wow.
I think he's good at directing comedy that takes place in different periods.
Sure.
But he let me improvise and do all sorts of other stuff, and he was really, really great to work with, and it was a very nice experience.
And that wasn't enough for that like heroin shot to make you think, I could do this. Like that's more screen time than most actors see in a lifetime.
Oh, no, because I remember, because in the late 90s, I would actively audition for commercials. And, in New York, at least back in those days, all the commercial casting agencies were in the same neighborhood. They were all around the Flatiron Building. So you could go there, hang out for a couple of hours, audition. Everyone went to great sandwich place on 6th Avenue, south of 23rd. It closed, but it's open.
Sal's?
Eisenberg's.
Very Catholic name.
Yeah.
Catholic deli.
It was just nice kind of community. And then I stopped acting and I became a writer. And then we moved out here in 2007, just in time for the writer's strike to hit. So then I thought, I'll audition for commercials again. And auditioning for commercials out here is rough. I mean, you're driving all over town. It takes hours and hours and hours. I mean, ideally with COVID, self-taping is a bit easier.
Yeah, it's awesome.
But I realized, there's a tremendous amount of work here. I'm okay as an actor. I'm better sitting down with a computer in terms of my creative output to the world.
I mean, I think that's such an honest take of your own value added, and that if you know that that's a trajectory where you can have success, then you got out of your own way. And the fact that you keep getting thrown roles anyway, it's kind of the best of both worlds.
And I hope that doesn't make people angry, but I have worked very hard to be in the places where roles do get thrown my way.
You're an asshole. No, it's okay. Sorry, Chris. Yeah, of course. I mean, you fought to be. Writing was no easy feat for you.
Yeah. It was pretty tough, and I didn't get my first staff job at the Daily Show. I was 31. I'd kicked around for a while,
sure.
And just doing sketch in New York and stand up while working my advertising job at a record company during the day, which didn't take up much of my time, which was good because I was the alternative writer in the 90s at Sony Music, and Pearl Jam was the big alternative act.
Sure.
And they turned on advertising immediately. Like I would have to write campaigns and stuff. Then Pearl Jam came along and it was like, nope, Pearl Jam, the new album. That's what the copy is going to be. And then all these other bands followed suit. Rage Against the Machine, the new album. So all my acts required nothing from me as a writer. So I would, and this is back in the days, the mid-'90s, when record companies just spent money like water. They had a ton of money. I had my own office on the 30th floor of 550 Madison Avenue, and I would do very little work. And I had a sweater or a jacket that I would drape over my chair, and I'd put a cup of coffee there, and then I'd scramble down and go to audition for a commercial, disappear for like 90 minutes, and come back. And, in the era before cell phones, it was easier to just
disappear.
Yeah. To disappear for a little while. And for all they knew, they were just walking by my office at the wrong time because, hey, his jacket's here, his coffee's
there.
Here.
Yeah. No one leaves both things.
Yeah. The computer's on. So I had a bunch of different, ways to do that. And it was a real hustle, but it was nice to finally have a job where you showed up every day and that was your job and you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And Daily Show was rough. Oh. When I worked there, it was very kind of a toxic environment.
Sure.
And it was a good show, but it was, oftentimes it wasn't a blast working there just because of personalities. But
and was it very competitive? I've heard that it's. Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Yeah. I think I've heard of late night shows where it's more competitive in terms of, they keep a scorecard about what writers get what on the air. Yeah. Like completely ignoring the kind of collaborative nature of things.
They're supposed to be writing.
Yeah. Well, some people can apply a sports mentality to almost anything.
Yeah, that's right.
So, those are ideally people you don't wind up working for. But like the job I have now, it's very collaborative and it's really nice. And it's considered in bad taste to, that was mine.
Sure.
And I found that places like that, traditionally, people know who did things and they give you credit for it. And if you have the job, it's because you know what you're doing. Whereas, particularly at The Daily Show, and it was a bunch of stand-up comedians just chomping at the bit and sort of like, was that mine? Was that yours? Was that yours?
God, that sounds so exhausting.
It's really exhausting.
And to have to keep up with the Joneses at your job, but also live in LA where you have to keep up with the Joneses. Then that hamster wheel in both worlds.
Yeah.
Did you ever have peace? I feel like that'd be a chaos.
I mean, you don't realize how hard you're working until you stop working.
Yeah.
Like I quit The Daily Show after about 7 years, and I didn't read a newspaper for a while just because cranking that out every day, day in, day out, just really wore you down to a nub. And then you have some time off, you get back into a show, you work 12 hours a day. Okay, I'm in the zone. And then when there's a hiatus, like, I can't do anything.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to be at a show where it takes each episode about 14 months to get on the air.
I don't think people understand how intense the animation, but also specifically animation that with jokes. It's like, it's not just writing My Little Pony. It's like, no, you have to remain relevant.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very big writing staff. Like our writing staff is a lot bigger than a lot of sitcoms because...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, because if you look at a standard 30-minute sitcom script, there might be one or two jokes on a page. Mm-hmm. Whereas Family Guy, there are so few straight lines in any episode. Like basically every line's a joke. So if we go for any period of time without a joke, it's just like, wow. What's going on here? But it's a good group of people. It's fun. We enjoy pitching together in the room, and it's also great because at late night, you're always at your computer typing. And when you go to the sitcom world, someone else does it.
That's nice. So you guys have conversations and there's people taking down what you're saying.
And a writer's assistant, bangs it out. And then we kind of organize everything and give it to the bosses to read. And like when we write our scripts, obviously we go off and do it on our own. But
sure.
But I was working on this horrible show called Lopez Tonight, and I worked there for a season, and the writers were expected to crank out so much material that would just go into a black hole, just totally vanish, that towards the end of the year, I was really developing some carpal tunnel issues, and I'd never had that happen before.
Because you were just constantly on the computer. Just
all day long, expected to just churn out more and more nonsense, and it was really putting me in some pain. So
sure.
I'm really glad to have wound up in the half-hour world. And I hear people in half-hour and people in live action. I mean, live action's difficult because you're dealing with actors and other people's schedules and showing up and
personalities
and dealing nowadays with people getting COVID on set and spreading it to everybody. So we're fortunate in that all our actors are, at this point, patched in via phone and doing all their voiceovers from different places. And, if they get sick, it's fine. The show can go on. We can just keep animating and do all that. So it's particularly a good show to work on during the plague of the last 2 years.
Sure. And you guys kept cranking out episodes during that time.
Yeah. We did 2 seasons remotely. And, we're back together now that it's abated somewhat. But yeah, we cranked out about 40 episodes in that time. We do about 20 episodes a season.
Well, talk about, like the delayed gratification of something from concepting to writing it out to air being 14 months. Like that's gotta, I guess you can't really be precious about any episode. You just kind of forget.
Yeah. And it was difficult for me at first as a writer because working late night pretty much exclusively up until that time, I started there 9 years ago, but you would know what worked that night. And you immediately got whatever rush. You knew what to do the next day, and what not to do. Whereas nowadays, I just throw out a joke, and in a couple of weeks, it gets animated or it gets recorded, and the first run is an animatic, which is a rough black and white version, and it's like, oh, okay, it worked. I feel good, but that sort of endorphin rush that I think a lot of comedy people need all the time. You learn to temper it a bit when you're dealing with with a timeline that's stretched out a bit more.
Wow. And so is there a joke that you wrote for The Daily Show or from any of your shows that you remember that you're super proud of, or are you not even that precious with your jokes?
You just crank out so many. It's funny though. There's one, I'm not even going to say it, but occasionally people try to cancel Jon Stewart with a joke that we wrote in 2004, I think. Might have even been 2002. But it was a joke about gender that tore the roof off the place then, but nowadays gets Sure. Again, forgive us all. It was 20 years ago.
Sure.
We've all grown and gotten better. And I remember looking at it, I'm like, oh, I might have written that, because I seem to remember I wasn't having a good day in the very end of it. And I'm just like, they won't do this. I'll type it in and put it in. And then they did it. And the fact that it seems to be floating around on the internet. And honestly, you can go through a lot of, Daily Show is a very progressive show. You can go through a lot of the stuff we did back then that is just cringeworthy now because it hasn't aged well. I think that's always a problem with comedy. Mm-hmm. I think it doesn't stick to John because, it was one joke and it was a generation ago. And, everyone loves Johnny Carson. Look at some of the clips of the stuff he used to do. It's really
some of it, even for then, I've watched some older stuff and I'm like, damn, Johnny. In between smoking under wow, that was,
we were triumphant white guys who were untouchable. There wasn't an internet to come after us. Us triumphant, back when us triumphant white guys roamed the earth.
What a time for you guys. I bet it was great.
That's something I have a lot of, writers my age who are just like, why can't we say blah, blah, blah anymore? And why can't we say that? And I'm just like, we said it for years. We can find something else to say. Like a couple of years ago, I could still make hay with, a fat joke or something. And then it came up on Twitter that people were kind of swatting me down. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, you're right.
Sure.
There are all sorts of new parameters and stuff. And if you're a decent writer, you can work around them. Like if it's your only move up to the net, as it were. Wow, I made 2 sports references.
You did. I'm very impressed.
You might be in trouble, but there are workarounds. But no, to get back, it's hard for me to remember. There have just been so many of them. Sure. And that's over the course of a 25-year career. That I don't mean to come across as like I'm such a joke machine. It's hard for me to.
But that's a long time working in a space where you have to crank out 60 jokes a day in theory, or sometimes less than that, obviously. But
the first joke I got on TV, honestly, I can look back and it's a very, very strong joke. Colin Quinn did it on SNL, and this is like 1998, and it was about the Gucci heiress who paid to have her husband knocked off.
Sure.
Have her husband killed.
House of Gucci addresses this.
Yeah, and but this was actually when it happened.
Okay.
And she was sentenced to 15 years in prison, which most people feel is a tremendous price to pay for a Gucci knockoff. And like
It's such a that's a great joke.
But went over like gangbusters.
I bet. That's funny now.
Yeah, and I was really, really thrilled to have that on. And Colin Quinn really picked some favorite jokes of mine. And, sometimes they would die in front of the audience. I'd feel bad. But I think he had really good taste in stuff he picked. I think he did it for like a season or 2 seasons when he hosts the Weekend Update. It wasn't a very long run. He was not the idea of a news anchor because he's kind of a blustery Irish American guy.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who they might have been Tina Fey after him. Yeah.
Maybe.
But no, he was great and he was really good to me. And I remember those first couple of jokes when I was working in advertising, like, I got something on TV.
Oh, that would feel so amazing.
Yeah, I could actually. There was another one about John Gotti Jr. being forced to wear a tracking bracelet. Many say it's the most tasteful piece of jewelry a Gotti's ever worn. It was like, wow, so it's weirdly 2 fashion jokes.
Those are great. I love it. So that's an interesting, I don't want to keep harping on it, but it's such an interesting era where you would literally, via fax, you would just send it to some number and then somebody would pick it up and bring him, here's the pile of jokes that people have submitted.
Yeah.
So you would put your name on it.
You put your name on it.
Okay.
You would have to submit by like 3:00 on Friday.
Okay.
And when I worked in my advertising job where I didn't do anything, it was great because if you got a couple of jokes on the air, the writer's assistant then helped you out by sending you setups. Like the straight lines, he would go through the newspaper and be like, Gucci Air sentenced to 25 years. And then you would write your punchline to it. And so they didn't do that for everybody. I think once they kind of realized, this person can sell stuff, we'll help that person out. But I think that fax number kind of went around like wildfire. Oh. I had Alec at SNL. I had another guy named Ray James who was writing for Weekend Update, who was a stand-up comic and who I've worked with many times since then. I think he was occasionally taking my stuff and putting it on the top of the pile as well.
Bless.
So, it's good to have somebody on the inside.
Yeah.
And, obviously people don't use fax machines anymore. Okay. But, I think at one point they changed the number and then some of us got an email saying, hey, the new number is...
Just in case you were curious.
Yeah, because I think the net had been cast so wide and comedians being people who are always trying to curry favor with other comedians, it's like, I might have this number if you want to, hey, you did a topical funny joke. You can, if I give you this number, you can maybe put me up tonight and stuff like that. But yeah, it was just a fax machine and a couple of good words from people.
And would you do that simultaneously post advertising job and on to your first actual like staff writing job? Would you still submit jokes like that to whomever?
Well, no, I was working advertising. I worked in advertising up until I jumped over to The Daily Show. I took a pay cut to work on The Daily Show. I bet you
did. That feels right.
But I was faxing all the time from my job. Okay. And then, he put in the good word with John. And then I got a call from Madeline Smithberg, who was one of the creators of The Daily Show, and the guy at the time who was the head writer named Chris Kresge. And they called me over to interview me. And John came in like halfway through the meeting. Like he had not quite taken over the show to the extent that he would within a year, because I think Comedy Central kind of picked him up like a bit of a hired hand, sort of.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was called The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, but I think he was listed as a co-executive producer then, when there were other people who were executive producers. And he leapfrogged over them eventually, and then was able. The head writer who was there, he was replaced. He didn't like it at all, and he left after a year. And then John was able to hire his guy, and then
the rest
so on and so on. Yeah.
Okay. So get us up to today. You're at Family Guy now.
Mm-hmm.
You have a couple projects that I know you can't really talk about, but you've got some things going on that you're constantly writing. You're constantly putting stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm currently pitching a 7-part historical miniseries,
and it's so cool. And I know we can't. We'll just leave it at that, but it is so cool.
Yeah. We're just about to go out and meet a lot of people about it, and I hope they take it seriously.
They'd be idiots not to buy it. They would be idiots not to. I'll say it.
Even if they don't want me to write it, I've written it. I've written the pilot. I'd be happy. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'd be happy to oversee it if you want to get
Well, you'd be willing to UPM a show or EP it.
But it's. I wanted to do something different. Comedy has changed a bit, and people aren't terribly interested in buying new comedic ideas from fellas who's
Cis white dudes. I'll say.
Yes, yeah. I check off some demographic boxes that people don't necessarily want to get in bed with anymore
Sure,
in terms
sure.
of creating work. And comedy is always a little skewed towards a younger audience. At least it is now. It's funny. I follow a Twitter feed that tells you what's coming up on Turner Classic Movies. And it's funny, there's so many comedy movies from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. Like, there's not one person in this under 40.
Wow.
And like you certainly would not see that anymore. If they want comedy with young people, written by young people. And again, I've had a great run. I'd be happy to stay at Family Guy. I love it as long as I can. But I thought if I'm going to do some new stuff, that maybe it'd be better to completely come out with something people don't expect from me. So that's kind of my strategy right now.
That seems like it's worked out so far. Everything you were facts and jokes, and now you're on Family Guy. So it sounds like you're doing things correctly. Okay, well, folks, we hope you enjoyed your apps. We're going to move on to the entrees after a quick break. Great.
It's
You're so prepared, Chris.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, I appreciate you sending me the questions.
Yeah,
actually,
it helps. Most people don't want to fly blind. Okay. We are back, and now it is time for the entrees. Okay, Chris. Now, as a long-standing, loyal fan of the podcast, you obviously already know how this works, but I always explain it. This is the part where you tell all the nitty-gritty stories, but this is the part that the audience loves the most, so feel free to go into all the horrors, because the dessert is their least favorite part. That's where we're positive, so they love this bit where you drag companies. So, what was your first job ever where the government was like taking taxes out of your salary? So people have said babysitting, things like that, which is fine. But do you have were you, I don't know, a line cook or a this or a that as your first job ever?
Well, I was a teenager. I think they might have taken some taxes, but not certainly not what a grown-up pays. But I was 16 years old. This is 1983. I had my working papers, which, meant I could drive on my permit to go to my job. But I worked at a supermarket in New Paltz, New York, near where I grew up, called a Great American.
Oh, boy.
And my father worked in supermarkets all his life. He was a butcher. And he was always very much, that was not going to be the life for me. But, my father being a butcher, I had to kind of go out there and earn money. And so, it was horrible. It was one of those grocery stores where you had to wear a little bow tie, a white shirt with brown polyester pants and a brown apron.
Oh, no.
And I never realized how dirty and backbreaking supermarket work was.
Ooh.
My dad was a butcher, which certainly was dirty and backbreaking. But I kind of thought, I'm the guy wearing the bow tie. It won't be bad. But it was, my first day. My manager, Don, whose name I remember still, I don't remember anyone else there, he had me up on a ladder in the store, hanging signs about specials. But I was really up 17, 18 feet, the high ceilings of a rural supermarket, hanging these signs, kind of pushing up. I'm not good on ladders. I can be 1,000 feet up. If I'm 10 feet up, I'm not good. And just hanging these signs, I was covered in sweat, absolutely terrified. Had to go out and collect the carts and move them in from the parking lot. And it's weird, in California, and I had to get used to this when I moved out here, people return their carts. In upstate New York, nobody returns their carts.
Would they just leave them by wherever their car was?
You just leave them by wherever your car is. You do the favor of putting the cart in such a way that it doesn't roll and hit someone else's car.
What heroes.
Yeah.
But you don't put it back.
But that was just tradition where I grew up. You never returned a cart. So I'd have to go through this parking lot and grab the carts. And this was the era before they had those little beeping machines that pushed your carts.
Sure, yeah.
So that was very, very difficult. And I got my first taste of class warfare because I had this great friend named Danny. He was my age, but he was a year behind me because he'd flunked out a year. And
no shade.
I was there working at the store in my bow tie and stuff. And Danny came in with some other kids I didn't know that well. And they decided to victimize me a bit because I was working. And Danny kind of joined in.
Ooh.
Just giving me a hard time.
And that was your homeboy? You guys were friends?
Yeah.
Ew.
I never spoke to him after that.
I bet. What a disloyal asshole.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have either.
But I think it was, kind of a weak-willed kid. He was maybe with some popular kids that he wasn't normally with.
Yeah.
That's when it occurred. That's when I finally arrived at the thought, some kids aren't going to have to work.
Hello.
And some of us are going to have to work. And that was the beginning of my anger at the world. Kind of. I was always like, hey, we're all in this together. We're all goofy. Everybody works a job. But no, there was half of New Paltz that didn't work a job. They were all the kids who were the descendants of the original French Huguenot founders. They went to the Dutch Reformed Church. We went to the Catholic Church. The Irish and Italian people went. Yeah, it was a big eye-opener in that some people aren't going to have to work. And you, Chris Regan, you're going to have to work.
So it was a wealthy town where you lived, is what I'm getting.
It is. It's kind of half and half because there's a lot of apple farming there.
Sure.
It's kind of a blue area and sort of a red area upstate. But there's a college there. So it attracted a lot of academics, and kind of smart people. But across the river, an IBM was there. And IBM in the 60s, it's funny, a friend of mine from Facebook posted this IBM kind of propaganda film aimed at people in New York to move upstate, and get a real job. And it was really a good quality of living for people in the post-war era. So there were some people whose parents were kind of rich because they worked at IBM. And then I think in the mid-90s, IBM totally cratered, and I think they had someone on staff to keep people from suiciding. Like, it was something where people had worked there 30, 40 years.
Oh, my
and
God.
they were suddenly out of jobs. But that town was in my rear view at that point. And so it was kind of, we lived a little out in the sticks. I didn't live in the town proper. So you hop on a bus and you get to school. And I certainly wasn't like farmer laborer poor, but I was different from the other folks. And I also began to realize that my folks were a little different because my folks emigrated here. And I think, they had kind of accents and they were a little different. And I was very much in sort of homogenous upstate New York. And that's when, between that and being taunted by rich kids while wearing a bow tie, I was like, oh, I'm not, things are going to be a little different for me, like throughout my life. I think I've been kind of sheltered to that fact. So it was an important job. I didn't work there that long because I got a job pumping gas.
Well, shit. Now, wait, before we go to pumping gas. So was that the same supermarket that your dad was a butcher at?
No.
It was not.
No. My father worked at the ShopRite chain, which was a different chain. ShopRite's still around. Great American is gone. But my dad never worked in our town. He was always stuck working at a different store like 40 minutes away.
It's also such an Irish family thing, and I can only say this because my family is Irish. It's that thing of like, oh, no, I could hook you up with this thing. But like, no, you can get your own fucking job. Like, no, I will not call the boss for you. Good luck.
Yeah, no. I was basically, when I was old enough to work, it was...
Bye-bye. Go to work. Yep.
Yeah, here. My father, when I got out of college, he and I were going to go on a little trip together to... we were driving up to Montreal from upstate New York. And my mother had just passed away, and I was planning on like spending a couple of weeks at home with him. And I remember him just tossing the want ads in my hand from the New York Times. I'm like, oh, okay, nope. I'm still expected to work always.
Got it.
It's never going to be a down moment.
Know my role. Do you guys have a big family? Are there a lot of siblings, or is it just you?
No. It's just me and my brother. We had a sister. She passed away a couple of years ago. But my brother's 9 years older. My sister was 8 years older, and then there was me. And my parents have since passed away. I have a couple of cousins. Some of them don't speak to me anymore because of Trump, I believe.
Such an Irish family thing. Why are we all the same? We are all the same.
Well, they're appalling because their mother emigrated here, like my father, and they're like all anti-immigrant all of a sudden.
Cool.
So.
Well, Trump married an immigrant, but don't get me started.
Yeah. And I have some great cousins who I'm very, very fond of. And I have an aunt left. But yeah, not a lot of work to do when it comes to sending Christmas cards.
Well, it's less labor-intensive holidays. Okay, so your next job was pumping gas. Mm-hmm. So the next question is, how many customer service jobs have you had? So we start at the grocery store, then we go pumping gas. What's after pumping gas? Caldor's,
which was a chain on the East Coast. It was kind of a fancier Kmart.
Ooh.
I worked in the sporting goods section, which meant I kicked a lot of questions down the line. But that was at Newburgh Mall in upstate New York, which apparently was just sold to the bank for $1.
Shut up.
Yeah, I mean the glory days of '80s malls. I mean,
they are over.
I was there for it, but yeah, it's mostly abandoned now. But then I went to the CVS in the same mall because they were offering me more hours.
Okay.
Caldor was just keep me on weekends. And then Pizza Hut. Then there was college, dishwasher in college, projectionist in college, summers in between college, mowing lawns at an Air National Guard base and getting sprayed with a defoliant called Green Death accidentally.
I can't take notes fast enough.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Keep going. No. Keep going.
Another job in college was a night job at Letterly Laboratories in Pearl River, New York. They made Centrum. My sister was an engineer there, so she got me this night job, which paid $9.81 an hour.
So that wasn't very Irish of her. She was very American at that point, where offering you a hookup at a job.
Yeah.
That was nice of her. Okay.
But that paid $9.80. I swept and mopped the Swift Pack packing room number 4.
Oh.
And it was a big assembly line room where they packed Centrum. And before I started, because I would work from like 10:30 at night until 6:30 in the morning, and I would have to count every Centrum that had fallen off the line.
What is that? Is Centrum the vitamin?
Do they not have? It used to be a one-a-day vitamin.
Okay, I think I've seen it. The green top. I think I've seen it.
They used to be a purple pill. I remember if you wet them, they became crayons. I used to find out a lot of great things at 4 a.m. at my job.
That's terrifying. We were ingesting crayons. That's terrifying.
But I would have to count every pill that had fallen off the line and put them in baggies and put them in this. And then I got to sweep and mop this one enormous room all by myself. Yeah, I think that was, then I graduated college and I started working like low-level PA jobs and stuff like that. But yeah, I think the last, honest to goodness, custodian isn't really, but I'd say, the lawnmower, projectionist, dishwasher, stuff like that. The dishwasher thing at college, I couldn't hack, even though I was in the back room, because that was, again, like, some students don't have to do this.
Oh, I get that.
But then I became a projectionist, which meant I was in a little booth working, so no one had to see me.
Okay, I'm going backwards. Okay, so pumping gas. We've had one other guest on the podcast who explained this, but I think I'd rather have you explain it too, because it's a very, very old school East Coast thing, which I think now only exists in New Jersey by law.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So could you explain, like, when people hear pumping gas, they think, oh, he means checking people out at the register.
No. And in upstate New York, in New Jersey, they're all full service. You're not allowed to pump your own gas. In upstate New York, the gas station I worked in, we had self-serve and full service. And when there was someone pulled up to a full service pump, I would have to leave my little office and put the gas in the car and then get the money from them. Or if they had a credit card, this is, again, 1983, 84, I would then have to go in and run the credit card and give them the carbon. It was a very complicated process.
And time consuming.
Yeah. Like no one was in and out of there very quick.
Yeah.
I was always happy when someone would pull up to the self-serve.
So every gas station had full service when you were growing up. So
and self-serve and full serve. But there was never a self-serve only gas station growing up.
Okay. So that was unique to New Jersey, still is. Okay. So then you would pump gas. Then Caldor's was Fancy Kmart. Shout out to Maral, who's the SiriusXM producer of this podcast. She worked at Kmart. She's the only other guest I've had on that has worked at a Kmart. So I know this wasn't exactly Kmart. So what was it that you did at Caldor's? You said sporting section?
I had a job on Saturday and Sunday in the sporting goods section.
Sporting goods. Okay. So what did you do?
I basically kind of, made sure the shelves were stocked, answered people's questions. But I was the kind of I went to a Sears a couple of years ago before they cratered, and
R.I.P.
But because I had a house in upstate New York, and I used to go to on weekends.
Big flex, Chris. Big flex. Go ahead.
With my ex-wife. Let's take away that old flex. But I remember going to a Walmart for the first time. In 2006 or 2007, and no one there knew anything about no one had a specialty or a section. And then I went to the nearby Sears. I wanted to buy a bike. The guy in the sporting goods section at Sears knew how to put the bike together, knew this and the other thing.
Wow.
And Caldor's was the same thing. When you worked in a department there, be it appliances, something like that, you had all the skills of a person working in kind of a mom and pop shop. Whereas what I've gathered from Walmart is they're basically keeping people warm so they can collect their food stamps, they're
not paying them enough. So it's like, why would you train them?
But they're not teaching anyone anything.
Nope, they're sure not.
But in the sporting, I had to wear a tie and a name tag and, a pair of khakis. And, just had to price things with the price gun and make sure everything was, faced properly on the shelf, brought to the front and dusted. And that was most of the time. That was a big chunk of working at a CVS. But facing all the aisles.
Wait! Don't jump ahead. We're gonna get there. Okay, so at Fancy Kmart, you work in the sporting goods. What was the dumbest thing you were asked? Do you remember, or some question you would get all the time?
I was the dumbest thing in the department because
you're not a sports guy.
I'm not a sports guy. They had that opening, and I could tell you what a soccer ball was and a basketball, but when anyone really got down to a nitty gritty question, I'd be like, "This sounds like a question for Marcus." And
Marcus, where are you, Marcus?
And Marcus was kind of the manager of a couple of departments there. It was only 3 weeks before I was offered more hours at the other end of the mall. I probably would have been fired just because I think I may have plumed up some of my knowledge about sporting goods before I got the job there.
Sure.
Because the gas station went out of business, so I needed something else.
You're like, I got to lie my way into somewhere because no Irish people are going to help me. Okay, so you work there Saturdays and Sundays. So you said CVS was willing to offer you more hours, was the attraction there.
Yeah.
So you didn't care that it was a pharmacy, that you had no emotional vested interest in this.
Everything was paying what the minimum wage was then, $3.35 an hour.
Fuck me.
Yeah.
That's what we make as servers, but we at least have tips. Like, how would you?
Well,
you weren't born in World War II. Like, you couldn't live on that.
But when I worked at the gas station, I think gas was 97 cents a gallon then, and that was considered kind of high. No, it was inexcusable. Like, what was even more frustrating was I remember in our break room at CVS, they had the postings of the rates of minimum wage. And through the Carter administration, it had gone up every year. When Reagan took over, nope.
No increase at all.
No, it was like, because this was 1984-85, the minimum hit like $3.35 in like 1981, and it was frozen then.
Jeez.
And it stayed that way a good long time. And you weren't making tips at CVS or at Caldor.
No, I imagine not. Were you? So it was literally just more hours. Mm-hmm. That was it. Okay, so what did you do at CVS besides having to arrange the shelves?
You're kind of an all-purpose clerk there. You work the register. On Sundays, we would get there early to do a hardcore facing of it, which meant I would get there at like 9:30. We open at noon. Malls used to open at noon and would close at 5 on Sundays.
How interesting.
Yeah, there used to be some remnant of blue laws on, but Sunday was a shorter day. You also made time and a half occasionally on a Sunday.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, which I think the whole concept of time and a half is gone now. But that was name tag, skinny leather tie.
You love a job with a good tie. Yeah, okay, skinny leather tie. Okay.
Not a huge store. We didn't have a pharmacy. It was a CVS out of pharmacy, so there was no pharmacist there.
Wait, so what was CVS before it was a pharmacy? Oh, that's why they changed the name to CVS Pharmacy. Yeah. Because it literally was just, I don't know what CVS stands for, but I'm going to look it up.
Consumer Value Stores.
You knew! Yep. I love it. I didn't even have to look that up. Wait, so it was meant to be selling like knickknacks and snacks and lotion.
It had drugs and, aspirin. It had over-the-counter stuff. Okay. And it had a magazine section and a bingo section. And
I'm sorry? I thought I heard you say bingo section.
There was a bingo section there.
What does that mean?
That's where you buy, there's a section, it was by pipes and across from condoms, weirdly enough.
You're having a crazy Friday, getting some pipes, some condoms, and some bingo.
Now, I remember there used to be, and this is 1984, there used to be a good yard dedicated to pipes and pipe supplies and Captain Jack tobacco and stuff like that.
Oh, pipes, smoking pipes. I'm thinking metal pipes beat people. I'm like, what?
No, thoughtfully sucking on a pipe kind of stuff.
My dad was a pipe smoker, so I get it. Yeah, oh yeah.
And then next to it was a bingo section where it sold chips and bingo cards and dabbers where you dab ink onto
Oh yeah, that's for
cards.
Serious bingo players, that's a big deal.
Yeah, and I think upstate being a fairly sizable Catholic community, bingo was kind of a big thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, we had greeting cards, we had magazines, we had it was really just kind of general merchandise, but we just didn't have a pharmacy in the back.
So did you work there when they added the pharmacy?
No. There some CVSs then did have a pharmacy, but this one didn't.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It's sort of like a Target with a supermarket versus a Target
without one.
Without one.
Yep, got it. Okay.
I was behind the register. I was facing, but yeah, you get in Sunday morning. I'd put on Casey Kasem American Top 40.
Oh, may he rest.
And then I would walk around and dust and We had 2 feather dusters. Both of them were pink.
Of course. Just to shame you further.
So just hit everything, pull everything to the front of the shelf, dust, pull everything to the front of the shelf, and just ideally in 2.5 hours, get up and down all 8 aisles or whatever. And you could do it because there were some sections which weren't really touched much.
Sure.
Like, I know we had an ethnic hair section, which
In
kind of
upstate
gathered
New
some
York?
dust in
Yeah, I bet.
upstate New York. And
But the condom section flew off the shelves because those fake Catholics were actually using prophylactics.
I mean, I was always so embarrassed by
Were
that section.
you?
Yeah.
Bless your
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah,
That's a very Catholic thing. I would have been too.
Yeah, I wasn't quite there in my life.
You're
But our magazine rack was handled by an outside magazine vendor, and they would come in once a week, and they would kind of do everything. Like if we saw something completely messed up, like I remember all the hair metal kids would come in whenever Cream magazine or Hit Parader came out, and they would like all go there and just thumb through to see pictures of Quiet Riot and Judas Priest and stuff like that. Then they'd put them always in the wrong place.
Yeah, and they're like, we're not buying these. We're just looking at new pictures.
And we sold cigarettes behind the counter. We sold adult magazines behind the counter, which was Playboy and Penthouse.
Were you so mortified? If you couldn't stand by condoms, there's no way you're handing some dude a Penthouse.
Oh, I was okay with grabbing one of them and thumbing through them. I remember when the Vanessa Williams Penthouse came out.
Oh, I didn't know she was on Penthouse. Good for her.
It was a bit because she became Miss America, and then some old nude pictures came out.
Oh.
And they released the Penthouse, where it was a picture of her on the cover with George Burns. So, gentlemen, start your boners. And but I remember we had an African American clerk named Deneen who bought every copy we got.
Oh, bless her.
Because she didn't want people
Vanessa,
seeing
yeah.
the first ever Black
Bless
Miss America.
her.
Yeah. Yeah, and she was making $3.35 an hour too.
Oh, that actually makes me want to cry.
Yeah, I think she probably, that was at least half a day's wages for her. But yeah, she got in there early. She's like, "Can I buy these?" I'm like, "Yeah." So she bought them all and then just took them out to her car and like tossed them in the trunk.
Bless her.
But people were coming in like, "Hey, do you have got the Vanessa Williams back there?" I'm like, "Nope, sorry,
sure
buddy.
don't. Deneen took care of it. Sorry.
We're all sold out." And that was a tough job because that was, in terms of customer service, that was really my first experience with several hours a day dealing with the general public behind a cash register.
And?
That sucked. That's when it was like when I was a grocery store clerk, it was okay. When I was a gas station guy, that was great too.
Wait, why was this different then?
Because I was trapped behind a counter and you'd be ringing somebody up and then some old lady would come in and wonder where the peds are, or like some old lady sock. Yeah. And that was also when I realized if you're wearing a name tag, some people
will use your name.
Yeah. And will just treat you really badly. But you would have a big long line, and sometimes you'd ring the bell to get someone from the back to come up, and oftentimes they wouldn't hear it. And it was just tough, and people thought nothing. And I also had to we're supposed to monitor shoplifters, which I absolutely did not do.
Of course not. What are you going to get beaten up?
Yeah.
But no.
And then I would, at age 17 or something, have to tell people my age, sorry, I can't buy you cigarettes. And then some of the hair metal kids would threaten to beat me up after work.
And you're like, I actually believe you, and I hate this job. Please stop.
I mean, oftentimes I would sell them, but if a manager saw me, I would really get chewed out because I didn't care.
You didn't, yeah. I mean, it's still illegal, but you're like, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we're selling a ton of these back here all the time.
Well, shout out to Carl Tart, another former guest on the podcast. He mentioned he worked at a Rite Aid, and this was in LA, and he said girls, like the influencer girls, would come in and just rob the place of makeup. And he was like, we knew exactly what they were doing, and his manager had said to him, you have to stop them. But technically speaking, it's not theft until they leave the property. So they can have it in their bags, and until they cross the threshold of the door, it's legally not theft until then. And he said to his manager, he's like, what do you want to do, run after them? And the manager was like, yeah. And he goes, I'm not paid enough to literally run after these people. I'm not doing that.
And I remember when we started there, I had to sit through a slide presentation about consumer value stores. And, I think they were based in Rhode Island at the time. I'm sure they've been bought several times.
Sure.
And they might even be a KFC thing. Like there's no more consumer value stores. But their whole thing was, for every item that's stolen, we need to sell another 26 to make that profit back. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
And also shut
sir.
up. Like, that's a lie. And please stop. Okay, well, folks, pause your stories because where we are up to is the hell that is CVS, and I'm sure you have more to talk about with that. So, folks, Chris is delightful and he totally understands the assignment. So we are going to wrap this part up. This is going to be the end of part 1. So, folks, you're going to listen next week to hear the answers to the rest of his stories. He's got more gnarly stories to tell us. But, Chris, before we wrap, how can people get in touch with you? Do you want people to... Your Twitter is fucking fire. So I don't know if you want people to find you on there.
Oh, no. Yeah, absolutely. I would love to be followed on Twitter.
Okay. How can they, what is your handle? How do they get, and is there are you on other social platforms that you want people to find you on, or would you prefer to keep it just to Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
If you want to look at pictures of my dog.
You do, y'all. You do. Where is she? She's sleeping somewhere in the house.
Oh, I wonder. But yeah, on Twitter, I'm at Chris R. Regan. There's an extra R in there because my middle name is Ronald, which is a long story. But, yeah, that's Chris R. Regan, Regan. I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Yeah, you are. You're very funny on Twitter.
I enjoy Twitter. And if you'd like to hear some of my jokes that
don't make it to air.
That don't make it to air or nobody buys, but by all means, please give me a follow.
Okay. Well, folks, we're going to drop your checks now. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to help us out here at Service from Hell, we'd love to have you subscribe, rate, and or review the show wherever you listen, which right now is on SiriusXM. Shout out to them. Thank you for having us on channel 771. And it will help us reach more people that need to be schooled in the art of being kind, and will be catharsis for those of us still working in the industry. If you want to get in touch with us here at Service from Hell directly, send us your receipts to servicefromhellpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Remember, if you can't afford to tip, you can't afford to go out. So don't be garbage and be good to people. It's easier that way. Okay, folks, that's going to wrap it up for part 1. Join us next week back with Chris Regan for part 2.